Well, look who we've got with us for this very special 49ers video, our only mock draft of 2026. We're going to keep it as realistic as possible, but the special guest is Mike. Mike himself is on camera. What's going on, man?
How's it going? I'm just real pumped for the draft. I'm excited to see what the 49ers are going to do and see how we fix the holes that we have on the roster. And just excited to be here with you guys.
Well, we already have the mock draft up on the San Francisco Standard, and you actually helped me make this. This is where it's at. The link is in the description. We're going to pin it up at the top of the comment section as well. We're going to go through the possible picks. We have two possible picks in all six of the selections for the 49ers, starting with Malachi Lawrence. And then what we're going to do is run a couple draft simulations. So I want to start with this and just talk about Malachi in the first round and talk about the different directions the 49ers go. Because what we've done with this mock draft is said there's another realistic option for the first round. And the 49ers could also theoretically go wide receiver. But I think both of us think that edge rusher, Mike, is the most likely path for the 49ers in that first round. But where do you see that strategy potentially branching off?
Yeah, so the first thing I look at is how the 49ers typically draft in the first two rounds, specifically in the first. And typically it is a defensive line or a receiver. I think the probability in the first three rounds for a receiver based off historical trends under the Lynch and Shanahan era is about 56% for both defensive line and the receiver. So I think we're hitting it on the nail with both Malachi Lawrence and with the receiver that we're drafting in the first,
Omar
potentially
Cooper
within
Jr.
your mock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes sense. And specifically as we go and talk about Malachi Lawrence, I think this is just a really weird draft where you don't know who's going to fall or who's going to be available. The one note that I'm hearing from, the sense across the league is there is going to be a run at the edge spot and at the offensive tackle. So it's really who's going to be there when we pick at 27. And I think there's a really big shot that Malachi Lawrence will be there. And he's one of the guys that kind of fits the role that the 49ers are needing, which is kind of a pass rushing specialist. Not necessarily somebody who in that the Michael Williams body. I think there's a lot of guys in this draft. TJ Parker, there's Akeem Mesidor. There's a bunch of guys in that range that we're drafting, but they're in that Michael Williams big body guy who are known for stopping the run, not necessarily for pass rushing. And I think this is where Malachi Lawrence fits that spot perfectly. Because he's a specialist in that regard. And then he can still potentially turn into a three-down, defensive lineman. He has the body to stop the run. It's not necessarily just a tweener. So I think this is a really good pick. I think it would not shock me if he even goes sooner.
Well, see, I pulled up this comparison of relative athletic scores that you made back when we found out that the 49ers were hosting Malachi Lawrence on a 30 visit. And this is him compared against Romello Height, another 30 visit defensive end. And this is to your point, Mike. Malachi and Romello Height have similar structured relative athletic scores, but Malachi is significantly bigger. Romello Height out of Texas Tech is very, very small and light, 6'2", 239. Probably going to have to add some weight just to play at the next level. And even when he does, is probably only going to be a pass rushing specialist. Somebody like Malachi Lawrence is not huge, but at 6'4", 253, I think that with his frame too, his frame can pack more muscle onto it. There's a picture of Malachi Lawrence. You could see that his arms can still add some more beef. If he does that, then he's no longer a 253-pound guy. He's a 260, and he's somebody who could theoretically be a three-down player. And I think that if you do use the number 27 overall pick on somebody, you would like them to be a three-down player like Michael Williams this past year. He obviously was a higher pick than 27, but that's where the 49ers select first. So these are the measurables: elite explosion, elite speed for Malachi Lawrence. He's the guy that we had in the first round. The other option, Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver. We can talk a little bit more. Why don't we get through some of these picks? Second round, yeah. I've got Jennings Dunker coming out of Iowa. Connor Colby's former teammate. The mullet is obviously elite on Jennings Dunker. But this just brings up one of the larger existential questions about this 49ers draft, Mike. they've broadcast they want to pick an offensive lineman. Either that or they're going to sign Joel Bitonio. They want to add an offensive lineman, and I think that they're very, very intent on doing this through the NFL draft. I think they want to plug and play at left guard. That is why this guy right here, Jennings Dunker, appeared on the mock draft, because he could be a plug and play left guard for the 49ers in 2026.
And the weird thing is we talk about offensive line specifically at the offensive guard spot where the 49ers, people talk as if the 49ers are unwilling to invest in that spot, and that's completely wrong. We've seen it with Aaron Banks with the second round. We have Purdy in the third. I think it makes sense that the 49ers come in the second round or in the fourth and draft a offensive lineman who can plug and play. Dunker would be one that I think can come in on day one and take that job. And we could potentially have our best offensive lineman group of the 5 in a few seasons. I think that's a focus that they want to do, specifically as our offensive line is older. You need to plug in some youth. And I think Dunker would be a slam dunk fit. We have already scouted within the Iowa group last year when we drafted can't think of his name at the moment. Connor Colby. And these two are actually familiar. They're actually good friends. Dunker has his mullet specifically because of Connor Colby. I think there's a lot of to like from that group. And they're specifically known for their run blocking ability. And so if he can come in and have the movement skills that we believe he does, because he does have the athletic profile, I think he can come in and win that job. So I'm not shocked there. I think the second round is probably as early as I would expect a offensive guard to be drafted this year for the 49ers. I don't expect the first round. I know there's some talk recently about the 49ers taking one at 27. I just don't buy it. I think they're going to use it at receiver or edge. I just don't think they're going to use it at guard this year at 27.
And I think a lot of the talk is also like geared toward tackle, and people are saying, well, this Trent Williams situation, even if that does get resolved, which we expect it to, he's going to be 38, and they find a way to thread the needle with tackle. But you and I have talked about this a lot. The 49ers have a very, very high threshold of physical characteristics for tackle, to draft a tackle in the first round. And those guys are normally gone by pick 10, right? Pick 27, you're getting into project territory for tackle, even with somebody like Caleb Lomu out of Utah. And the 49ers just haven't shown a willingness at all to take on a project when they're picking lower in the first round for that offensive tackle position, because he doesn't fit the physical characteristics. So if they do go offensive lineman early, I think it's more likely to be guard, but they also have not shown a propensity to select a guard with the most valuable draft capital. The earliest they've gone is Aaron Banks. So that's why I think, this corroborates what you were saying. The sweet spot, probably round 2 with somebody like Jennings Dunker. And one more thing, you mentioned the competition that he would have. That's Robert Jones, whom the 49ers signed. And, this is a clue to me, Mike. Robert Jones is more of a power blocker than he is a zone blocker. 49ers want a mauler, I think, at left guard. And they've had maulers before. I mean, it's not been strictly dainty outside zone blockers specifically at left guard, a position that requires some pull blocking. We saw the game against the Falcons last year. They ran a ton of power. I think that they want a guy there. They want a road grader at left guard. And I think that Robert Jones gave us a hint, and somebody like Jennings out of Iowa would give the 49ers more along that theme.
Yeah, and I think the one note with offensive tackle, I just don't see it. I think with Lowe and Pleasance on the roster, there isn't a spot to take one high enough where you're like, okay, we can carry 4 tackles, and it's not impossible, or 5 tackles. It's not impossible. I just don't see it. I think it makes sense if they take a tackle, if they plug them at left guard, but then it gets a little complicated there. And this isn't the draft like prior drafts where you have an offensive tackle, but I don't know. This is the thing that we haven't seen with this group, where you're plugging a person into a different position to then move them back. It's just tough.
I think that starts to introduce variables that make it unlikely, right? We talk about Occam's razor, the simplest path of action is usually the true one. It actually hadn't happened all that often in modern NFL history where you have a guy successfully move from a guard position to be a dominant outside zone left tackle. The skill sets are just really, really different. You're playing in a phone booth as guard, and you're playing out in a lot of space as a tackle. And sometimes instead of trying to find jack of all trades and a master of none, just find the master of the left guard trade and then figure out a way to find the master of the left tackle trade. And the 49ers have a master at left tackle under contract right now in Trent Williams. You're not going to get better there. Like he's at the top of the game, and no matter who you draft, you're not going to get better in the short term at left tackle. So I think that the 49ers acknowledge that that's a realistic take on that situation. And the way that you make it better is by making left guard better. And they have broadcast multiple times that they want to draft one of these guys. Our other option in the second round was Romello Height, and that's a player whom we had just talked about a little bit earlier. Romello Height has visited San Francisco, defensive end, but very light. So this is a pass rushing specialist. However, Mike, you love the Texas Tech defensive line, and Romello Height was part of that unit.
Mm-hmm. And my only concern with Romello Height is he may not be a viable option this year. I just don't know if he has the body yet to be able to be a part of the defensive line this season. And the other part is he is a tweener. He isn't going to be able to stop the run. You're drafting him for a role, and I don't know if that role can translate into a 3-down lineman. And so you're really just putting him into a specific role. And maybe the 49ers are okay with that. I'm just not sure necessarily that. I mean, this is what happens when you're taking a guy in the second or third round at the edge spot. You're going to have some things that are necessarily things that we like, but we'll find out how this plays out. I'm just not sure with Romello if that's something that the 49ers are okay with, like having a full-time tweener. We really haven't seen it with this group. Outside of Bryce Huff, my mistake.
Yeah, but they had Bryce Huff or they had him planned for a very specified role, right? They needed a speed rusher. It needed to be a pass down guy. They didn't anticipate that Bosa would be out for most of the season. They didn't anticipate the Michael Williams ACL. I mean, they had so many injuries that Bryce Huff was forced out of his dedicated role into a role that he obviously was not going to be as effective in. So I think a big question here is exactly what type of roles is Raheem Morris going to want, right? And I think that the signing of Cam Sample, the veteran defensive end, hints that, and John Lynch had already alluded to this at the NFL Combine, I think that the duties of the defensive end position, or at least the frame of reference that the 49ers are searching for talent, has expanded a little bit. 50% of the snaps that Cam Sample took for the Bengals last year were standing up as an outside linebacker in a 3-4. I don't think the 49ers are going to be moving to a permanent 3-4 under Raheem Morris, but they're going to be running a lot more of the 5-man fronts, which means that you're going to have guys standing up that are technically defensive linemen, which means that you're going to want maybe a little bit more athleticism and ability to drop back into coverage. And that it just changes the scope of what you're looking for out of those defensive ends to where it's not just going to be a Bryce Huff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I was saying the roles will change, and what you're asking for them to do would be a little bit different. I like it. I think the big thing is they need to add speed. I think that's the big proponent that they don't have on the defensive line is speed, and we're gonna get it.
Well, yeah. And speaking of that, Romello Height does have it.
Mm-hmm.
Speed is great. Explosion is great. Malachi Lawrence does have it. And there are other options that are fast in this NFL draft. Let's go on to the next pick. So we've gone through rounds 1 and 2 for the 49ers. That's pick 27 and pick number 58, assuming no trades. They don't have a third round pick as we currently speak because they traded it to Dallas for Osa Odigizua. So now the 49ers, we move on to the 4th round where they have a handful of picks. And the first one in that 4th round for San Francisco comes at number 127. The guy that we selected with our mock draft up on the San Francisco Standard was a receiver out of SMU. So you went receiver a little bit later, Mike. Jordan Hudson out of Southern Methodist. What do you like about Jordan Hudson?
Yeah, the big thing with him is he has, a little bigger frame than what we normally have. He's a 6'1" receiver. The last couple receivers that we have drafted, very small. I think this would be a good addition to the receiving room. You got to add more youth, and I think the thing moving forward is you don't have to do it high. I think whoever you're drafting likely won't have a day one role, and it might be a role for 2027. I think that's the big thing to kind of think about it. And this is what I like about this draft. You don't force the receiver pick early. You come in the 4th round. You take a guy that you like a lot. You bring him in on a 30 visit. I think it makes sense. I think that's the 4th round, I think, is a good spot for the 49ers to take a receiver. I think the more that I think about what the current issues on the roster, it just makes more sense to take a guy in one of those 4 picks.
And that's why you bring in Mike Evans. That's why you bring in Christian Kirk. Essentially 1-year deals. You could keep Mike around for longer if it works out, but Christian is a 1-year deal. You have fortified the floor of your receiving room that way. Now you can potentially raise the ceiling with a rookie, but I don't think you need to have an instant impact guy, especially since Jacob Cowing and Jordan Watkins are still going to be knocking on the door of some playing time this year. Another option, I mean, we talked about Hudson, who the 49ers have had a private workout with him. They have a top 30 visit with this guy, and that is Caleb Douglas. And you talk about size and somebody that should be available in that 4th round. This is Ricky Pearsall's former teammate at the University of Florida. He then transferred to Texas Tech. He is a receiver who does come with flaws, but again, you're going to get flawed players in the 4th round. You're not going to have any perfect prospects anymore at this point in the draft, but he is tremendously gifted as far as size. He's nearly 6'4". He's got good speed. He runs a 4.39. As you can see here, the composite speed grade is great. You watch him play. He's a smooth runner. He had 20 plays of 20 or more yards this past season. This is a receiver who can generate big plays with his long strides. The issue, Mike, has been drops. He had 7 drops this past season with Texas Tech. But again, you're not going to find a perfect player at this stage in the draft. And I think that you take a swing to upside. We discussed this over text when we found out the 49ers were hosting this guy, Caleb Douglas, on a 30 visit. He has played the Z, which is Ricky Pearsall's position, in a spread. So he hasn't really been asked to block all too much. I think that he's got the size, Mike, to be the X if the 49ers choose to take him in and then obviously put him in the weight room. But at 6'4", if he could bulk up to 220, which I think he can, this is the lankier guy, he could at least moonlight as X. And the reason that I like drafting a larger receiver is because that receiver could give the 49ers that potential flexibility. We've seen how valuable that X receiver position is when the 49ers have to operate without one.
Yeah, I think with him, I think he'll end up playing, the 49ers like to put all the receivers at all 3 spots. So I think it makes sense. I mean, the big thing is, we haven't necessarily replaced a big slot receiver. That's a role that we need to see what happens on the roster.
So you're saying earlier playing time potentially for somebody that's tall, young, they can kind of work in as the number 3 as a slot.
Exactly. I think it makes sense. I mean, the receiving core that we currently have is relatively small with Watkins and Cowing, and they're projected to be in the slot position. He has the speed, and I think down the line, you're looking at him in a year or 2 potentially taking over at the X position. In the meantime, why can't we try to put him in the slot? Why can't we use him in the red zone with his big frame, kind of helping the red zone woos that we've had in the past? I think that's the big thing. And I think that's a discussion point that we've had together, is adding size for Purdy, because that's something that benefits Purdy. You kind of want to put Purdy's very, tedious with how he's throwing the ball, and he's putting in specific positions, and I think having receivers with size would benefit him. Something that we haven't really had outside of Jennings
And
I
and Jennings and Purdy, they hooked up for some
yeah.
great catches, and that's when Purdy was putting the football right where it had to be, where only a tall, tough receiver could go get it. Purdy throws a really catchable football. He throws pillows up there, so those are great for these receivers who can go up and get it. Purdy is a slightly shorter quarterback, so the trajectory of his throws, I think naturally to get it over certain coverages and sometimes even pass rushers tends to favor tall receivers. You saw it back when he was at Iowa State. He was throwing to taller receivers. Charlie Kolar, actually, the tight end, was one of his favorite targets. He recently signed with the Chargers, I think, right? Charlie Kolar. So anyway, tall receivers, Brock Purdy, I think, with the quarterback who's led the league in accuracy on throws of 10 or more yards over each of the past 3 seasons, it makes sense to have guys that could run the route tree beyond 10 yards and give you an advantage in one-on-one situations. I think Mike Evans, if he's healthy, will be a dream combo with Purdy. In the first round, we could have mentioned Denzel Boston, who's also visited San Francisco, and he's of the Mike Evans type. He's a contested catch guy, but I've seen some of it from Caleb Douglas as well with his 6'4" height. So maybe not as much consistency as a Denzel Boston, but again, you're going to get what you pay for, right? You're probably going to have to settle for a less consistent player if you're going to receiver in the 4th round instead of the 1st round. But I think we both agree that might be worth the trade-off for the 49ers.
And then one name that I just want to throw out there, Skylar Bell, with his yak ability. I think he fits the 49ers. He's a 6 foot, 185 pounder. I think he would probably compete with Cowing and Watkins. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sold on Cowing making this roster. I think there's a lot of pressure on him this season. We heard it from Lynch at the combine talking about him. I think I'm just not sold with Cowing making this roster. If he can't stay healthy, I think it would make sense for them to target a receiver to kind of compete with him with Watkins.
You could never have too many guys in that room. The 49ers have literally run out of receivers. I think in each of the past 2 seasons, it's been a big issue. And you brought up a great point earlier. This is a pick. The receiver pick has to be viewed through the lens of 2026 and beyond. And the only receiver, because we're not counting Brandon Aiyuk, and I know I've said this a million times, but I'll keep on saying it because it's important when you're talking about this draft. The only receiver on this roster to have scored a touchdown in a 49ers uniform that is under contract beyond this season is Ricky Pearsall. So you have to build for 2027 and beyond. And that's why all of these guys are possibilities. Another option in the 4th round, Kentucky guard Jalen Farmer. That's in case the 49ers don't attack that offensive line earlier. But if they're really intent on adding a guard at some point, Farmer's a road grader out of Kentucky, kind of like Jennings Dunker out of Iowa. So that would be an option with either of the picks. Or, I mean, there are multiple picks, obviously, in that 4th round. 49ers pick 4 times as of right now in that 4th round. So I guess we can view all of these selections in one cluster. Move on to the local kid, Mike. Sam Roush, the tight end out of Stanford. He didn't show up to the 49ers local pro day, but he did make his way to the end zone, as you can see here, for Stanford. And this is a very versatile player. Good hands, has been a wide blocking tight end. I think that, everybody surrounding the 49ers was disappointed with Luke Farrell last year. They wanted better blocking from him, and they didn't get it. Now he's coming over from a different type of scheme, but especially with George Kittle coming off of the Achilles, I could see tight end being a position that the 49ers attack in this draft.
Yeah, and I think you take him and have him compete directly with Farrell. I think that makes a lot of sense. And if he can take Farrell's job and you're able to release him come August, I think that would be great. I think Sam Roush could actually potentially be a guy that can be in that. I'm not going to compare him exactly to Kittle, but in that mold where he has more, receiving capabilities in the NFL. I think a lot of that could potentially come out. He is an athletic guy. He has the size. I think that would be a great addition, especially if you could add him in the 4th round. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think we have a specific hole because I'm not necessarily sold on Farrell being our blocking tight end. I think that's a big hole that we need to fix. And it makes a whole lot of sense. In the fourth round, I think with one of those picks, a tight end is coming. It just makes a lot of sense.
Look how good this relative athletic score is. And this is almost the perfect 10. This is crazy. And you know who blew people away with his athleticism and was picked in the fifth round was the guy you're talking about, is George Kittle back in 2017. So I think there's a whole heck of a lot to look for here. One of the more ridiculous takes I saw this offseason, you saw it too, we were kind of laughing at it. Everybody freaked out that John Lynch didn't go to Stanford's pro day and like, oh, they must not be interested in Roush. Georgia had their pro day on the same day. There's a lot more players that the 49ers should be interested in from Georgia than Stanford. No offense to my alma mater. They're getting things turned around over there. But B, John, he's a Stanford guy, so of course he knows. He doesn't need to go to their pro day to know that Sam Roush is this kind of athlete, right? So I think Roush is definitely on the 49ers radar. And I think that if he's around there in the fourth round, and if somebody like Kenyon Sadiq doesn't drop down to 27, we could have different conversations if that happens in the first round. But if that doesn't happen, then this is a real possibility for the 49ers in the fourth.
Yeah, and I think it's the over analyzing specific things like that. I think as we're moving forward and AI gets more built out and we have a lot of GPS and trackers in the shoulder pads, I mean, why would you go to Stanford's pro day? It makes no sense
They
to
don't
me.
need to. For anybody who's
John
ever
Lynch,
not been to a pro day, they are pretty big waste of time. Like they're more of social gatherings. Like it's not, you're not determining whether or not you're going to draft the player based on the pro day. You really aren't. But they're a chance for all these GMs to get in the same spot. It could even spur along trade talks. Say, if John Lynch and Howie Roseman are at the same pro day, it gives them a chance to talk in person, build a rapport. You remember how CMC got traded from the Panthers to the 49ers? If San Francisco hadn't played at Carolina that year, that trade probably doesn't happen because the conversation,
he's a Ram.
Probably a Ram. The conversation between Lynch and Carolina, I think it was Scott Fitterer, right at the time was the GM, started at that game. It was, I think, week 5 in Charlotte. So just like the case in any business, face-to-face interactions are very valuable. And that was what made 2020 really suck, is because you lost a lot of that possibility. But it's back now, and I think pro days are more about that, right? More about putting in FaceTime than they are about actually determining who you're going to pick. I'm going to go back to this mock draft. You have VJ Payne. Oh, another tight end option. He went to Cal, was at the local pro day, is Jack Endries out of Texas. Decent athlete. Not as good of an athlete as Sam Roush, but somebody we can keep an eye on. You really like VJ Payne, a safety out of Kansas State who shared the defensive backfield with Marquise Siegel, safety out of Kansas State that the 49ers picked last year.
Yeah, and he's a 6'3" safety who can run a 4.4. I think he makes a lot of sense. I think with the fourth round, you're really looking at just profiles, specifically athletic profiles. It's kind of more of a projection with these guys. But you look at how we drafted Siegel last year, and he was able to play day one. I think in the same boat, the 49ers can potentially draft a guy in the fourth round and have him compete versus Brown and Siegel for that spot. I think it makes a lot of sense. I would probably guess that the 49ers are going to in that position to take a safety if with one of these fourth round picks. It just makes too much sense. And I like to just base things off of athletic profiles with these later round guys. And this is one that I think he can come in. He could play, strong safety. He could play nickel. He could play free safety. We could do too high. I think he fits the defense that the 49ers currently run. And I think, the one thing that the 49ers like is drafting captains. He was a team captain with, so I think it just makes sense. I think you want somebody in there specifically with communication. And captains usually are the ones who lead with communication. It's so necessary, and it's something that we saw last year with Fred Warner going down. The communication aspect kind of fell off. I think that just makes a lot of sense if you want with your safety spot.
Well, the fact that he played with Marquise Siegel too means that the 49ers have probably seen a lot of his tape. And also, this is not nothing, that they've seen how he plays with Siegel. And so much of safety is communication and just feel, right? Chemistry. And if you feel that Marquise Siegel could be a guy of the future for you, pair him up with a teammate with whom he played really well alongside at Kansas State. So, and I did a big piece on the DBs the other day. Siegel was their best tackler by far at safety last year. He was the only one with a missed tackle rate under 10%. Everybody else was like 16, 17. He's fat. He has all the tools. What he wasn't able to do was play the ball. I I don't know. I'm not pretending that I know that he's going to turn around that facet of his game, but he belonged on the field when it came to pursuit, when it came to tackling, even when it came to positioning. I thought Siegel was fine. He just didn't play the ball. I don't know if things were moving too quickly for him last year, but if he can take that next step and actually cover and knock balls away, then I think the angles are the harder part of all this. The angles at safety are so difficult because if you blink once, the guy's gone. You're the last line of defense. So I think Siegel's got that part of his game taken care of. If he can take the next step in coverage, pair him with his teammate, VJ Payne, I think it'd be a cool pick.
Yeah, and I guess we just don't know what Raheem specifically wants with that safety group. I mean, we think Mustafa has that job, but what if we don't want our safeties to be, maybe we want two free safeties out there instead of having a box safety? We just don't know, especially with Hobbs, how they're going to potentially change in the five-man fronts, and how we're seeing the league adapting. Basically, your safety needs to be used in so many different ways. So we'll see what Raheem ends up doing. I think that's a big point that we just don't know because we haven't had that discussion with Raheem yet. I guess we'll find out. And we're going to find out first because the draft's going to hit first.
And we have, it's good because he's going to not talk until the rookie minicamp. So, yeah, it's going to be anybody's guess. And we're piecing together some of the clues. Another potential safety in round 4 is Zakee Wheatley out of Penn State. And then, toward the end of round 4, maybe the 49ers toss in a running back. I mean, I know that would be something that fans wouldn't like, but they do need a little bit more depth there. Maybe they just wait till undrafted free agency. Maybe they trade back. We talked about Robert Henry Jr., who's out of the Texas San Antonio. One-cut runners, reminded some people of Elijah Mitchell, who went in the 6th out of Louisiana. But Isaac Garendo went in the 4th. He's still on the team. We also had a fast corner, a 6'4". This guy's really interesting in round 4. Tacario Davis out of Washington, a 6'4" corner who runs a 4.41 40. He could be as flawed as ever, but with those two numbers, I mean, that's taller than Richard Sherman and faster than Richard Sherman for comparison. Somebody's going to take a chance on a player like Tacario Davis, and maybe the 49ers will with one of those 4th round picks. I think, at that point, especially if you feel good about what you've satisfied positionally, you definitely go best player available late in the 4th round. We'll see where the 49ers are. Along those lines, Mike, why don't you run a simulation here? I know you can open that up on your end, and we can run through this once just to talk about the potential strategy and how things might shake out. So I'll let you take the screen. I just removed mine, and there we go. There's the simulation. Take it away.
Perfect. Yeah, and so the big thing is not necessarily talking about specific players, but it's more so the positions that you can potentially take in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round. And one thing that we've talked about, like cap space, that it kind of flows into future years. And I think with draft picks, what you take in round 1 is going to affect what you take in round 2 and round 3. And so there's definitely different outcomes from, every potential pick. And the big thing that, I mentioned this earlier, is that offensive tackle and edge could potentially be, a major run in the 1st round, specifically with how this draft is built. I think it makes sense that we're going to be in an interesting spot at 27 to see who's available. Typically, if we look at historically, we've drafted 2 receivers around this area, Ricky Pearsall, Brandon Aiyuk. So the only other time that we've been at this spot is when we drafted the linebacker Reuben Foster in 2017 when we drafted. I think we traded up.
Yeah, they traded back up from the 2nd round, I think, to get him, right?
Yeah. I think at 31 they took him. So it's kind of hard to see, but the big thing is I look at the receiver position here with Omar Cooper and Denzel Boston at potential runs here at this spot, I think we're going to see a receiver run in about the 25 to 32 spot. And, 49ers could be in prime position to take a receiver, to take or to trade back. And that's kind of one front that we haven't necessarily done with this under John Lynch. I think we've only done it a handful of times. When we drafted Kinlaw, we traded back one. And then when we drafted Solomon Thomas, we traded back
it was only one spot,
time.
but it was one valuable spot because those were both upper half first round picks, right? So they were able to get quite a bit especially for the Thomas one, they got quite a bit in return in 2017.
Yeah. And so my thinking is I do think the 49ers need to trade back. I just think you're able to create more flexibility. I just don't know if that's something they will actually do. I think it's just hard to say.
Can you propose a trade? Can you propose something realistic?
So we actually have trade offers here.
All right, what are they?
So here is one from the Falcons. And this is one thing I don't want us to trade back 50 times and we end up with 16, mock 16 picks, because I don't think that's realistic. But you can kind of look at this option like, okay, the Falcons want to trade up. They don't have a first round pick. They traded it to the Rams. Okay, they want to come up. They're being aggressive, trading a 2027 second round pick to move up. Does it make sense for the 49ers to move from 27 to 48 is the question.
So what's interesting to me is that the 2027 draft is considered much stronger than this one. So any capital in the top 100 picks, and this would be top 60 picks, right, of 2027, I think is worth really taking a look at. Plus, you add a pick this year, and it's a top 80 pick this year, right? So why don't you go ahead and accept it? Well, let's just accept it for.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's turn into traders here, not trader, TRADERS. All right, so now we don't pick until 48, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, we're at this spot. And let's just look to see. Let's see what happened at 27. So they came up for Chris Johnson, who's having a major hype right now. Everyone is talking about Chris Johnson coming in now at the end of the first. You see Denzel Boston, Omar Cooper taking at the back end.
So there's your
of
receiver
the first.
Run. Yeah, there's your receiver.
Yeah,
run.
Malachi Lawrence goes at 33 to the Jets. So at this point, we are at 48. I know that you talked about Bernard. I think you had a friend who reached out to you saying that would make sense for the 49ers. We got Malachi Fields. Let's just take a look at the edge group, because I think that's
I want to know what's the edge group. Yeah,
it gets real nasty. I'll be honest with you. This is why I think Romello Heights there. I think that makes sense.
Time to call Joey Bosa.
This is where I'm like, okay, exactly. You're like, okay, I'm not sure if these guys are going to be able to be a day one impact, but hey, let's call Joey and see if he's willing to take a $10 million offer.
That's what we talk about with the prices changing after the draft if they don't get one of those positions, right?
And that's why Joey Bosa is waiting, because he's not getting the offers that he's wanting. But, come post-draft, a team might come up and offer him a $10, $15 million deal. And there's no rush at his point in his career to just take a discount. So Bernard, do you want to take Bernard, or do you want to look at another position like offensive
guard? Look at
guard?
guard. I think now is a good time to look at guard, actually. See what's there.
Emmanuel Prugan, I think that makes sense. There's actually a couple guys. I think this actually makes a lot of sense to take one of these guys, even getting Dunker.
If you like both Dunker and Farmer, though, I think the chances of one of those guys being available at the next pick are decent. So we can also look at tight ends.
I just wanted to look. This guy just doesn't fit because I'm just not sure about his blocking ability. Eli Stowers, he's the number 2 tight end. I think Bernard, if you like him, you just
let's
take
go
him.
With Bernard. Yeah,
you can look at. Yeah, let's just go.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then we're dropping down to 58. Again, they're going to offer you trades at every point in the simulator. I'm not sure if that's as realistic as you could think, but they're offering us a 4th round pick next year to move up 5 spots.
Yeah, that would be awesome, but let's keep it realistic. So now we're at 58, so and now go to the guard market at 58.
See, one guy, Dunker's there.
Let's go Dunker. Mullen wins. Dunker, yeah.
All right.
This is
Now,
fun.
okay, probably need an edge spot. I think that's the big thing that we need to kind of look at. We could also look at that safety group and just kind of figure out. We got Wheatley,
There's a key
who we
Wheatley.
talked
Yeah.
about. There's Jalen Kilgore. And with Kilgore, he played nickel in South Carolina, and he didn't necessarily look great at that spot. I think the tough part with safety is you don't know how it translates from college to the NFL because a lot of it is mental with the
Yeah.
safety spot. So
Yeah, it's communication, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So at the edge
BJ Payne
spot,
is there, but he's way down.
we can wait on him. See, the edge spot gets really rough if you don't take a guy relatively early.
And that's why we think the
So
49ers will likely go 27 edge. Like I would say that's probably
it
the
just
likeliest outcome.
it makes sense. I think at this point, best bet is to wait it out. Let's look at let's take our boy Wheatley from Penn State.
Let's
What do you
do it.
think?
Safety seems like the best value here based on the board. Now everybody's big board's gonna be different. That's why this is so unpredictable. But it is exhilarating.
Yeah, you just don't know. It makes it fun because you can come in. This is what NFL, GMs are doing is they're kind of making a lot of simulations just to see how it plays out, to see if their guy, if you take a receiver in round 1, who are you taking in round 2? It makes a lot of sense. Let's get the tight end group.
We can get Roush if we want
wait.
to. You want to wait for
We
Roush?
can, but I think we can wait. There is a lot of guys still available. Let's look at the edge group, see if there's a guy. There's Overton. I think that would make sense. Let's look at his profile here. So he is a 6'3", 278. He's a little big, I think, for potentially. It seems like he's fallen as a round 2 projection, supposedly.
He's not overly
let's look at
athletic.
Some other guys. No. I think again, this is why I'm like, hey, if you're going to take a pass rusher, you got to take him in round 1 because it gets a lot trickier, specifically in a draft.
And the 49ers are so traits based with these pass rushers. It's hard to see it happening later.
It's
with Robert Beal Jr. when he was a 5th rounder, he had the traits, right? They were really traits based. It's rare to see a guy with the traits fall that low. I'll let you make this pick. Pick a guy.
So let's see. You know what? Let's pick. Let's get the running back group.
Oh boy, you're gonna make a lot of fans mad. I love it.
I just like to make things interesting. What I'm looking for now, there isn't really a guy. This is the big thing. The running back position this year is real tough at the top of the draft. Actually, the first 3 rounds, it gets real tough. I know there is some talk about Washington Jr., the running back who's projected to go in the 2nd and 3rd round. I just don't see it. I think it makes more sense that the 49ers take shots at running back in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round than early top 3.
I agree.
Let's just take. Let's see. Let's take Michael Trigg out of Baylor. What do you think?
Go for it. This is your pick.
Size. Let's go. All right, we got so many picks now.
Yeah, we have 2 more.
So we're at 133.
We have 3 more picks.
What do you think at the core? Yeah, there's our guy Davis from Washington. Seems like he's fallen.
If you really want to bolster corner, you can. And we've already picked the safety, right?
Yep. Do you think it's possible that the 49ers are going to add a corner who can make the 53 with what we just added?
With Jack Jones?
Yeah.
I mean, if they like a guy enough, then this is what I always tell people about the draft. Like, never say never. If they like a guy enough, then this is the NFL. They'll kick a guy off the roster for competition.
I just think it makes sense for the 49ers to go add another addition, specifically with size. We just don't have a corner with size currently. I think it just makes a lot of sense. All right.
And then round it out with...
Let's take our
Robert
boy
Henry. Robert Henry. Yeah, there you go.
UTSA.
Running back, one cut guy. Screw Arizona. We're not trading with them.
Overton's
Fine.
still there. I'm just going to take him.
All right.
He's
Yeah, you
too
could take
good
a
of
flyer
a
at this
player.
point. Flyer at this point. All right. There's
Again,
a draft.
And that's why I think it makes sense for the 49ers to hit on edge in the first round. It just becomes too difficult to take a guy who can come in and you know. Hold on,
There's no pick 262 this year. So there's our final draft. Bernard, Dunker. So they address offensive line. They didn't give us a good grade for Dunker, but I don't care. Wheatley they liked. Overton fell all the way to 139. Henry.
And we got a second round pick.
That's cool.
For next year.
Well, that was fun, man. Thanks for taking me through it.
No problem.
Cool. All right. Well, there's your mock draft. We ran through a simulation. Go check out the mock draft up on the San Francisco Standard. We give a couple of good options. And Mike, it was awesome having you on.
Yeah, no, thank you for having him on, and it's going to be fun to see what the 49ers pick. I'm all on the Malachi Lawrence pick at 27. That's where I'm leaning on. It just makes too much sense.
All right, Lawrence at 27. He bulks up a little bit. He turns into a 3-down rusher, and then the 49ers probably don't have to change their price for Joey Bosa. That'd be a win. All right, thanks, Mike. We will talk to everybody soon.